Hi, and welcome to this tutorial where we are going to make a garden planner printable. I am recording this at the beginning of February 2023, and I'm starting to think of my own garden. So I think this is the perfect time to make one of these printables and get it out onto the marketplace as people are starting to think about spring planting. Also, I want to mention Fruitful Freelancing's low content Intel membership. So I came up with this idea of Garden Printable also through looking through the February 2023 report. So if you're unfamiliar with this service, it's a monthly membership that provides you with a report. This month's is 61 pages of low content books specifically for the Kindle platform. That is what's being analyzed in this report. And I'm not going to reveal everything that's in here, but we will take a look at what's included. So analyzes titles and subtitles, puts them in a word cloud for you so that you can see what some of the more popular topics are in this season. It also takes a look at what the covers look like for some of the top selling books, also what keywords they're using, what categories they're putting books in, taking a look at some of their descriptions and some of the keywords that are included in those descriptions. Is it independently published or not? Is it a new book or not? And what is surprising is sometimes the newer books are doing better. And then looking at some of the pricing information and marketing information. So there's a lot of information that is packed into here that if research is not your thing, this might be something to check out. So I'm going to leave my affiliate link in the description if you're interested in checking this out. And then I also want to quickly mention that I will also be posting this tutorial to my course website, Printables Academy, and it will be a very inexpensive app to pick up. The benefits of which will be you won't have any ads playing over it. I will also break it up into chunks so that you can watch the different parts of this tutorial in smaller sections. I will also include commercial rights to the printable that we're making today. So we're making a 6-page printable, which looks like this. And so you will get the commercial rights to this. All you really need to do is maybe change up the fonts and add your own decorations, maybe change the colors, and you will be ready to sell your own. So that will also be included. I'm going to also have a list of Etsy and KDP keywords in that package, as well as show you a little bit of my research process in coming up with the pages for this. So if you're interested in that, I will also leave a link. All right, let's start designing. So I'm going to be working in Affinity Publisher version 2. I just want to point out real quick that if you decide to do the little upgrade that I mentioned, the template comes in a version 1 document. And that is because you can open version 1 documents in Publisher 2, but there isn't backwards compatibility. So Affinity at the time that I'm recording this in February 2023 has been out with version 2 for a couple months now, so maybe not everybody's upgraded, so I want to make sure that nobody gets left behind if they're interested in that template. All right, so the next thing I want to mention is I'm going to make this as a printable at letter size, and in Publisher, the reason I'm going to do it in Publisher is if we wanted to also make this into a KDP book, it would be easy to convert it to a different size as well as turn on facing pages. So we're going to go to File New. That pops up this window. And under my print presets here, I'm going to go to Letter. And you can see it automatically defaults as if I am going to be making a book. Facing pages in this Pages tab has a little check mark. I'm going to just turn that off. And now we're going to have single pages at a time. If you ever wanted to change this to KDP, you could just come back here and turn facing pages back on, and then you would just rescale your layout to be a different size. We're not going to get into that in this particular tutorial because we are making this as a printable. So click Create. One thing I could have done in that window and should have done is actually adjust my margins. So not too late. I'm going to go back to Document Setup. And I am going to go to margins. And with this little chain link turned on, I'm going to make them all 1/2 inch, but I actually want it 1 inch on the top. So we'll unbreak that chain and just change the top one to 1. That's the quickest way to set all of your margins. We'll say, okay, and now we have our margin guides. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a master page. We're going to make these all on master pages, and we need to get to the pages window. So I'm going to go to Window and Pages, and I'm going to click on the master pages. So I'm also going to click on this title here so that I can rename it. The first thing we are going to do is a raised bed planner. And we're going to do 2 variations of this. So the first one we'll call A. And I've got this surrounded by a blue outline, so I know that this is what I'm working on right now. And now I can go and put in my title, and we'll call it Raised Bed Planner. And so the purpose of this printable will be that you can do one of 2 things. You can plan out where you're going to put raised beds in your garden, or if you already have them, you can use this grid to kind of draw out the orientation of your set of raised beds, because sometimes people have more than one, and you can kind of draw that to scale using this kind of grid or graph paper. So let's highlight our text here, and I'm just going to change the font to something a little prettier. And I think I used Papyrus. And then with this snapping turned on, I'm just going to kind of move it around until I get this green line down the middle. And then also, because my box is sitting right on my top margin guide, I'm also getting this red line pop up across the screen that shows me that I am lined up to my margin. So that's nice and centered. Now, the easiest way to create a grid or a graph paper type of effect is to use the table tool. So that's what we're going to do. And so I click the table tool, hold the left mouse button, and just drag out a small table. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this icon here. When you hover, it says Table. That brings up my various table options. So I'm going to hold my left mouse as I kind of skim across this colored part. You can go across the top or down the side. That will select all of your cells. And in this cell section, I'm going to change the width to 1/2 inch, the height to 1/2 inch. All right, so now we've got perfect 1/2 inch grids. And let's kind of position this in a nice place. And I think we've got room for maybe 3 more down here. So back to the table tool at the bottom here, I'm just going to click on the double arrows. That brings up this little box. And let's make this 18 instead. And then over here, I think I have room for maybe 15. Let's see what happens. Now, I don't know why it likes to maintain everything when I adjust the rows, but not when I adjust the columns. But let's just go back and change the width, make sure the height is still 0.5. And that actually turned out pretty perfectly. So now we have our 1/2 inch grid. We can use the Move tool to just position this until we get the red and green lines pop up that tell us that we are centered. And in this case, we are centered to our margin lines. You can see that I've got an equal amount of space from the bottom of the table to the margin and from the top of the table to the margin. All right, let's do a couple more things with this. We want to change the grid so that it's easier for people to draw over. So if we have black lines like this, even though they're fairly thin, it might be harder for people, especially if they're using a pencil, to see what they're drawing. So let's make this really light. So with the table tool, I'm going to select all of these rows, And then under the stroke and fill options, I'm going to go to border, and the second one on the top row says inside. That will select all of my interior lines. You can see they all got kind of bolded because they're selected. And then I'm going to go to the color, and it's on the color wheel right now. I'm going to go to tint and just change the black tint to about 40%. I've also got this stroke weight here. I'm going to leave that at 0.5 point. That's a nice thin line. And so now I can click away and you can see that all of the inner lines turn to a much lighter gray. So there is our 1/2 inch variation of a raised bed planner. The next layout we're going to do is our second variation of the raised bed planner. This just has a smaller grid, but we're also going to have some of the lines be a little bit thicker. So I have got, this is like normal graph paper spacing, so 1/4 inch through all of these. And then I've got every 5th line is a little bit heavier. So let's make that. So the easiest thing to do will be to just work with what we've already got. So let's right click the thumbnail of our master page and let's duplicate that. And so now we've got a second one. First thing I'm going to do is stay organized and say that this is layout B. And so now let's change these grids. So let's take a look at it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes in this direction, each of which have 5. So I need to have 30 total columns. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think it's 7 here. So 35 rows. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually just slide along here holding my left mouse so that I select every cell. And I'm going to change this to 0.25 both directions. Now I'm going to click on this little box again, the little double arrows. We'll make this 30. You'll see it did that same strange little quirk. If anybody knows how to fix that, leave a comment. And then I'm going to select all of these again and go back and fix this to be 0.25. Now we have our basic grid. We can adjust the centering again until we get our guidelines pop up. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I can see that it didn't maintain the same color on all those additional rows. So I'm going to select everything, go back to the stroke and fill area, and click all the inside cells again, and click on the color, go to the tint, and just make sure that everything is at 40 again. And now we've got it all changed to 40. So the next thing we're going to do, now that we have changed all of our lines to light gray, is we are going to make some of these darker. So I want every 5th one to be darker. So I'm going to select my table again. And what you'll notice is if you click on one of these, it should select the whole column. But sometimes it grabs this little drop-down arrow instead. So if you're having problems with it selecting a particular row or column, zoom in a little bit if you've got like these really small columns. That helps it to pick the column instead of accidentally grabbing the drop-down arrow. Same thing happens when you're working with a small cell size like this. You can adjust the width of your columns when you wait for the double arrows. It's sometimes harder to get those to pop up when you're zoomed out. So go ahead and zoom in and then you'll be able to get the action that you want. We'll be talking about the double arrows in one of the other layouts that we're going to be doing. So if that makes no sense to you, just hang on, we're going to get to it. All right, so if you're on a PC, hold down Control. If you're on a Mac, hold down Command. And we're going to click every 5th cell. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The other way you can think about it is you're going to leave 4 spaces. I don't need to do these last 5 because this is going to be my border. Because I want the edge of the 5th cell to be the thing that's darker, When I've got all of these selected, I'm going to go here and I'm going to look for the one that has the heavier line on the right. It's in the third column, second one in, and when you hover, it says right. So we're going to select that. You can see now all the right-handed edges of my column selected are selected. Let's go back here and let's change it to black. And then optionally, if you want to, you can also increase the stroke weight a little bit. Let's bump it up to 0.7, and that makes it a little bit more obvious. Now we can do the same thing going down the rows. So I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can grab them all. So 5, hold down Command or Control, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. So on this one, in order to get 5 cells, I'm going to do the bottom line of my selection. So over here in the stroke and fill, I'm going to look for the one that has the bottom line a little bit heavier. It's the first one in the second column, and we'll click that, and we will make that black. We'll also click on the stroke weight, bump that up to 7, and now we have got our grid. Now let's make the border a little bit darker too. So let's click this, go up to the frame section, which is what controls the outside border. Click on stroke, we'll make it black, and we'll turn the weight up to not 21. Let's make it 1. That makes a nice little outline. All right, so there's our second printable created. Let's take a look at what we've got next. Okay, so the next printable that we are going to create is this square foot garden planner. And so what square foot gardening is you divide your bed into square feet. So a 1 foot by 1 foot area. And then you either plant 1 plant, 4 plants, 9 plants, or 16 plants in that square foot. That's going to be dependent on the plant and how big it grows, how much space it needs. So we are going to make this printable for a 3 by 4 foot raised bed. That's not an uncommon size. The other way you could go is 4 foot by 4 foot, but you'd have a little bit more problems with your printable going to the margin. You'd have to do this a little bit smaller. So I'm going to do it as a 3 by 4 foot bed. And then the other thing we need is some sort of key, because people will draw in either symbols or letters or little colored blotches to represent their plants. So in the research, I saw people using letters as their key. I saw people using colors as the key. So by having these open boxes, they could color it in and use colors, or they could write the letter or symbol that they're using for each plant in the box and then write the name of the plant here so that they have a legend to what is in these squares. All right, so let's make this. So I'm going to go back to my original 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch grid, and I'm going to duplicate that master just like we did previously. And now we've got another copy of that. And just to keep things neat, let's go ahead and retitle this right away. And it's going to be a 3 by 4. Next thing is we will go to the text tool and change this to square foot planner. And we will go to the move tool and just adjust that so that it's centered. And then we'll take the same table and we will edit it down. So in the one that I made here, I'm going for 3 square feet across. Each square foot is divided into 4 sections. So I need 6 boxes across and 8 boxes down. So I'm going to click on these little double arrows. We'll change this to 6, and we will change this to 8. Now we want to get these all nice even sizes again. All right, so we're going to highlight over all of these squares. And then let's go to our cell options here. Let's make this 1 inch by 1 inch and see what we get. Okay, so it's a little too big. We don't have room for our legend. So let's maybe try 0.9 and see if that works better. And I think that does. So a little bit of trial and error is never a bad thing. Sometimes that's just the easiest way to do something. Okay, so we've already got our light gray lines and our darker border from before. So I just need to go back and do the same thing we did before. Click on this table tool and I'm going to click every other one while holding Command or Shift. I don't need to do this last one. I only need to get these inner lines. So again, by selecting column B and column D here, I want the right-hand line to be the one that's a little bit darker. So I'm going to go over to the border section, look for the one that has the right-hand line a little heavier. I can confirm that that's selected, and then I can go and change that to black. Again, if I wanted that to be a little bit heavier stroke weight, I could also change it to 0.7 there. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing going down here, and let's select every other one, 2, 4, and 6. In the stroke and fill section, we will find the one that affects the bottom, which is first icon on the second row. We will click the cell color, make it black, and then we can click the stroke weight and make it 0.7. All right, so now we have our grid. It's time to make our key. So I'm going to go over to the shape tool and I'm going to pick the rounded rectangle tool. You can use just a square or a circle if you like. And I'm just going to create a box. This is about 0.3 inches or so. And if I want to make it perfectly square, I can just adjust it over here. So let's make it 0.310 in both the width and the height here. And now we've got a perfect square, and then we can click this little lock button and that will keep everything proportional. I also need a line. So for that, I'm going to go to the pen tool over here, and under mode, I'm going to select line mode. And then I've still got my snapping on, so it's going to help me with some guides here. I'm just going to go next to my box and click, and that will drop a point there. Hold Shift to keep my line nice and straight and just extend out a little bit. Click again, and there's my line. So I'm going to go back to the Move tool, and now we have a line here. If you want to adjust the color, you can do so in this stroke up here, and you can also adjust the stroke weight over here in this box. Now I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to click on them and do Command or Control G to group. You can also go Layer Group. And now they are grouped together, so they'll move as one. And I'm going to do Command J, Control if you're on a PC. And that made a second copy of my groups. In the Transform box, I want to move it down. So up and down is the Y direction. So it's currently positioned at 8.62 inches down the page. So I'm going to click after that 2 and add plus. And I think I want these to be about wide ruled spacing. So let's do 0.34 inches, return, and that automatically dropped it down. Now without doing anything further, don't touch anything, Command J again, a couple more times, and now that duplicated it down the page with the same sort of spacing. Now I can grab all of these, copy and paste, which was Command C and Command V, and then holding Shift, I can drag it over this way, and now I've got 2 copies of this. So now what we can do is we can do a little bit of manipulation in order to kind of even things up with our, let's just grab all of these. I'm going to group these for a second and group those. And now we can kind of play with these as a unit and decide what kind of spacing we want for them. So I'm going to grab all these and holding Shift so they stay in the same horizontal direction. I'm just going to decide where I want them. So let's just go a little off center with this one. So here's our center line. So we're just a little bit over from that. I'm just kind of eyeballing this. And we'll just hold Shift and this one in so it's roughly the same distance. And I think that looks okay. Now, one additional thing that you can do is we grouped the line and the box together, but I am actually going to select this top one and this bottom one and layer ungroup all. And then now I can grab all of these boxes here, group them, grab all of these boxes, group them, Control G or Command G, group all the lines over here, group all the lines over here. So the reason I do that is if you ever want to come back to this template and make some changes, now whatever I do, like if I want to change the stroke on it, I can go to this group, select all of them holding my Shift button, go here, pick a different color or so, and now they're all fuchsia. And so by grouping them into like things, then I can make changes to all of them at once. And so it makes it just a little faster in the future if you want to change things up. So now we're going to make the second variation of the square foot garden planner. So we did a 3-foot by 4-foot in kind of a portrait or vertical orientation. So this time we're going to do a 5-foot by 4-foot bed. And we're going to make it so that you can put 4 or 9 plants in each square foot. So I've got each of these squares has a solid line. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 feet in this direction and 5 feet in this direction. And then there's little dotted lines dividing each square into 9 sections. So you can put 1 plant, you could put 4 plants in each of the kind of intersections of the tic-tac-toes, or you could plan for 9 plants in this square. So that covers 3 of your bases with square foot gardening. It doesn't allow for 16, but you could also take this a step further in your own design and make a 16 plant version as well. But this makes it pretty versatile. You can do 1 plant, 4, or 9 in here. So let's change up the square foot planner that we had to make it a second variation. So let's go back to the one that we had and let's duplicate it. And so now I'm going to go on the duplicated one, and just to keep things clear, let's label this one, double click on it, and we'll call this square foot. This was our 3 by 4. And then our other one we'll call square foot neatness counts 5 by 4. And then I'm just going to double click on this one to make sure that that's the one we're working on here. And let's go to this table, and we will go to the table tool again and up to this icon for our table features here. And we want to have this, first of all, be 5 across by 4. So now we need to go to our table tool and we need to adjust how many squares we have. So before we had 3 main squares across divided into 4s, and now we want to have 5 main squares divided into thirds. So we need 15 total squares over here. So I'm going to change this to 15. And then I'm going to go to the bottom here, and we want to have 4 rows, each divided into thirds, so we'll have 12 total. So enter 12 and enter. So now we can just kind of grab these handles, stretch it out a little bit, just to kind of get things started in terms of making this look nice. And I'm also going to switch to the move tool and just kind of position this down a little bit. Now let's change our squares up. So with the table tool selected again, first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that all of my table has consistent cell width and height. So I want them to be perfect squares. So right now it's 0.492 by 0.53. Let's go with the smaller of those numbers because width is kind of our limiting factor in this design. We don't want to go over the edges. So let's make this just an even 0.49 and this an even 0.49. And now we've got perfect squares again. So the next thing we want to do is we want to basically get rid of all of the bolder lines that we had before. So let's go and highlight everything again. And in the stroke and fill, we are going to find the one that says all inside horizontal. And we'll just change those all to this gray. So this was gets this one here. So we'll click this one here from our recents. And then I'm going to go to all vertical, just do the same to make sure that they're all the same color. So now everything is even on all of my inside squares. So then with the table tool still selected, so now we're going to make all of our inside lines dotted. So I'm going to select everything and let's go to inside lines, hit the stroke here, make that dotted. And under the dash settings, we'll do 2 and 4. So that's the length of the dash and also the length of the space in between. So that makes pretty nice dots. And then one last thing, let's go back and let's every third one hold Command and select every third cell going across here, except for the last 3, because we're going to again affect the right border. So we will come over here and affect the right side, and let's turn that back to solid and maybe up to 0.7 or 8. Okay, so now those are back to solid, and we just need to go to this one, to 3, hold Command or Control 6 and 9. And this time we want to affect the bottom and turn that back to a solid line and 0.7. Okay, it looks like we had a little stray here that didn't want to cooperate, so let's just hit this cell here. And let's make sure that that one is dotted 0.5. There, that fixed that one. All right, so now we have a square foot planner that has 5 squares across, 4 down, and then each one is divided into 9s with a dotted line. So that is our square foot planner printable. Next, we're going to do our companion planting worksheet. So this will consist of 4 boxes on a page that will say which plants are good companions for this plant and which ones are not good companions, so which ones to avoid planting near each other. So let's go back into Affinity and make this happen. So I'm just going to take one of our masters and again duplicate it. So right click and duplicate, and then I'm going to click on that duplicated one and we'll click into it to say companion planting for this master. And then I don't need this table, so I'm just going to delete it, and then I can go into the text, click on it, and go to the artistic text tool, highlight this all, and we'll call it companion planting. All right, and we'll just kind of take a moment to just make sure we're nice and centered with that. And then we can also use a table for this. So let's go back to our friend, the table tool. And this time I'm just going to draw out a table that stretches across the whole width of it. And let's just quickly double check our reference. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need 6 rows and 2 columns. So same as we've done before, we'll click into this number here. We'll make it 6. We'll click into this little set of double arrows here, make that 2. And then we will just stretch it out a little bit. So approximately like that. And we can go into our table features and we can look at the cell height. So it's 0.328 inches, so that's good. That is bigger than a college ruled notebook, but less than wide ruled by just a hair. So that's a decent height for it. So I'm going to take these two top cells and highlight them, and then we're going to right click on it, and just like you do in a spreadsheet, we're just going to merge cells, and that makes this one long cell. And now I can go into this cell and just type plant. I do not need to switch to the text tools. I can just leave the table tool on. And then in this one, I'm going to say companions, and in this one, plants to avoid. And now I think that these ones should be centered, so I'm going to go up to this area and center align them, so that will center them horizontally in the cell. But right next to that is a nub centering option that will do the same thing vertically. So I'm going to do center vertically, and that pops the words right into the middle of that cell. So with this, I do want to keep it left aligned, but I do want it centered vertically in my cell. And then I want this word, the P of this, to not be quite so close to the edge. So let's click on that cell again. And for this, what we're going to do is we're going to use the cell insets. So I'm going to do the left inset. So that's how far it is from the left of the cell. And we'll just push the up button a little bit until it moves away from the left edge of the cell. So the only other thing I had with this is you can select the whole cell again. We can go to the stroke fill here in this middle section, and I'm going to choose a fill color, and we can pick some sort of green here. Let's do that. And then for my companions and plants to avoid, I also want to do a fill. Let's go to the swatches, pick that, but then let's go back to the color and just make it a slightly lighter variation. So I'm just going to drag this in the triangle towards a lighter green, and that just makes a little bit of a contrast between kind of our main heading and our subheadings here. All right, so that table is complete. We will put that where we would like it, and now let's just copy, Command C, or you can go to Edit Copy, and then Command V or Edit Paste, and we'll drop it down. You could also do the Control J, the power duplicate that we did before, but I'm just going to drop 4 of these onto the page. I've got the bottom one here at the bottom. I've got the top one kind of near the top here, and now let's select all 4 of these tables and go up to our alignment options, which is up here. It looks like a bar graph, and let's take the align vertically and space them vertically, and that will make all 4 of our boxes be evenly spaced on the page. And that one's done. So our last page is the when to plant page. So we'll make this with the table as well. So back to Affinity, I'm going to go to my companion planting master page. And besides right-clicking to duplicate, you can also go up to master pages here, and the second icon with 2 pages will also duplicate for you. And then we can click on that, click into it to change it to when to plant, and then we can click and make sure this one is selected. And with my move tool, I'm going to just drag over all of this and delete it. And then we can go into our text just as before, change our title. And then I'm just going to, still with snapping on, just move this over so it's nice and centered. And then let's create our table. So let's look at our example. We need all 12 months plus inside or outside and plant name. So let's go back here. So 12 months plus inside, outside plus plant name is 15 columns. So let's just draw this out. And Let's just start with 15 columns. And then I'm just going to shrink this out. We can always add more when we have a better sense of how many lines we can fix, but let's just go with about 25 for the moment. And then I will grab this little dot and drag it out. And we can kind of double check and say that this gave us a 0.36 inch height of our cell. That's probably a little much, but we are going to make this first one be wider. So first thing let's do is let's make our 12 narrow columns here and then a wider column in the first row where we can put our plant names. All right, so I'm going to select the B cell in the colored area, hold the mouse and drag over everything. And let's make the width of each of these cells about 0.25 inches because they really only have to put an X in there to say that this is the month that the plant gets planted. Now let's go to the A column and I'm going to hover between A and B until I get double arrows and then hold Shift while you move everything over. And what holding Shift will do is it'll make sure that we preserve the columns that we just made instead of kind of squishing everything next to it up. All right, so now we need to make this column a little bit wider. So I'm going to grab in between one, and I think that's about enough. And then we can bump this whole table up a little bit, and we already can see that we've got too many rows. So let's just squish here. And we'll maybe make this, go back to the table tool, just a little bit wider. And then we can go into that first cell and type the title for this column and name. And then in the B column, my cursor is up here right now, but I want the words to go up vertically. So in my table options, under rotation, I'm going to choose the one on the far right and rotate it 270 degrees, and that moved my cursor over here. So the first two columns were inside, and now you see when I tab over to the next column, it's starting at the top again. So what we need to do is make sure that we grab this cell by clicking in the cell, holding the mouse and dragging, and we'll select all of these and make sure that all of them have this rotation applied to them. Now I can do outside, and then I can start with my months, and I'll just fast forward the video a little bit so you don't have to watch me type all of these. And then let's take this and let's drop this to the bottom. So in our vertical alignments, we're going to bottom align, and then I'm going to select this cell. I'm going to make sure that this in my cell insets is unlinked, so it's a broken chain. And then I'm going to, on the bottom cell here, inset, I'm going to click the up arrow a little bit. That will get it off of the line a little bit, so to 0.07. And then from the left, I'm going to do the same thing, just move it over a little bit. Now I can set the rest of these cells to also have that bottom inset of 0.07, and that will make everything even in our words here. So let's double check our cell height now. So we're still plenty wide here, so let's go ahead and just squish it up, and that looks fine. Okay, so just a couple more little formatting things. Let's make this text a little bit wider. So I'm going to click on this cell again with my table tool on, and we'll make this maybe 20. These we won't be able to make quite so big, but let's select all of these cells and maybe just bump it up to 14 just to make it a little bit easier to read. And then the other thing with these ones is I want to highlight all of them. And it's a little counterintuitive, but because we turn this rotation on, we're still going to center this vertically in the cell, and that will make it go centered between the two lines of our column. All right, and then now let's choose our January through December, and in my swatches tab, I'm going to use that same lighter color that we had before. Now, it doesn't seem to be remembering my darker one, so I'm going to go back to companion planting, and I'm going to turn on the color picker tool and select this color, and then move tool, come back over here, and now I can highlight this and select my saved color there. All right, so I think we have done everything. Let's just adjust our height again, double check that our cells have not gotten too small. 0.31, so that's still good. And I think that is everything that we needed to do for this one. All right, so there are 6 starter pages for a garden printable that you can follow along and create. And you can add your own pages to this to customize it to the needs of your customers. So thank you for watching this tutorial. And as a reminder, all of these videos, along with some keyword research for garden printables, ideas, as well as commercial rights to the 6 pages that we just created, is available on my website. I will leave the link in the description. Thank you.